Making icons and logos has become exponentially easier thanks to the modern design tools, which only gives you the simplest, most necessary tools to get you started. Figma makes it even more powerful with their vector network, which offers greater flexibility for editing the vectors. Now, instead of connecting paths one-to-one, you can create web-like connections. Like this, you don't need to always continue your vector points. You can just draw new ones from any existing ones, or you can connect them to others. Now let me show you what I mean. First of all, I'm just going to create a bunch of rectangle to create new icons and duplicate this multiple times. Then I'm going to zoom in on the first rectangle, Shift 2. I'm going to create a 24 by 24 rectangle. Center it and then rotate it at 45 degrees angle. Now, in order to start editing the vector points, you have to press Enter like this. And then we're gonna go to the pen tool right here. You can press P. Now, normally in the traditional vector design tool, in order to recreate this shape, I have to do a few vector points like this. And I press Shift, go here. I even have the smart guides to help me. And voila. And usually you can't do much more than this. You have to close every vector point and it creates a shape. So let's delete this and let's try to take it to the next level from here. So in Figma, you can actually extend any of these vector points. So I'm gonna start with this one and I'm gonna be precise. So I'm gonna create a vector point right here, right underneath it. And I can use my keyboard to be more precise using Shift and down arrow, 1 and then 2. So now I just extended this vector point. So if I decide to use the move tool, see how it follows. That's really neat. I'm gonna go back to the pen tool and I'm gonna do the same with these other points. This one, click here, use the keyboard, 1 and then 2, escape, click this other one, click here, use the Shift down arrow twice, and I'm going to close it from here instead. I'll do the same on the other side, and voila. Now suddenly all of these faces have become shapes. So I can go to the paint bucket tool and I can see that each of them are shapes. So I can decide to fill them like this and this, and each of them can be filled or hidden like this. I'm going to press escape and add a fill using one of the styles like this one, for example, and add a stroke like this one. So I have a 1 pixel stroke that's black. Now here's the magic. I'm gonna press enter and I can move any of these shapes and see how it's following. It's like magic. It feels like a 3D cube. Likewise, I can go to any vector point and move it like this and like this. So everything just follows. Let's try to change the perspective of our cube. All we need to do is select these 2 vector points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're moving upwards by 5 pixels, and the top one as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 downwards. And now we have a different perspective of our cube, and we can always change any of these faces to get a different perspective. Now what if I want to separate the shapes so that I can have different gradients for each of them? So let's try to do that. Make sure to select it and not have a mouse over state. So like this, for example. and do Command C and then get out, escape, select this, Command V. Now I can move it around and you can see that the shape has been separated, but don't change the positioning because otherwise you won't be able to have a perfect cube rearranging manually. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna do the same for the other faces. Double click. This is mouse over. Click again. Copy. And then Command V. Mouse over. Click again. Command C. Command V. And now I have the three shapes. With these three shapes, I can basically decide to do any kinds of gradients. So I can remove, for example, the stroke. I'm going to remove the gradient, add a new fill, and use the color picker to have one of these colors. The same thing for this one. And then this one as well. So I can decide to make this one a little bit darker. And now I have my 3D cube. I'm going to move these shapes. Command Shift V to here. I'm gonna group them actually and center it. So I have two different icons, and obviously I can play with the perspective. Like this. Now let's learn a little bit about Bezier curves, because yes, you can create polygons by just creating these vector points, but you can also curve them to make them more interesting and to create very unique shapes. So the first thing we're going to do is press P, and then from here I'm going to zoom in a little bit and create a vector point here. I'll move down a little bit by perhaps 20 points, and it doesn't need to be precise, by the way. This can be from here to here, let's say. And when I arrive here, I can press Shift, and then when I click, I need to hold the click like this, and I move by about 10 to 15 pixels like this. So here you can see that I'm using the Bezier curve to really change the direction and the curving. So I'm gonna release it right here. And now I'm going to go back to original point. So from this I just created a drop icon, and it's as simple as that. Now I can always edit the Bezier curve by clicking here, and this is where you can see these little dots where I can change and edit my Bezier curve. The other thing I can do, well, first of all, you can see that this is not mirroring both. It mirrors the angle, but it doesn't mirror the length. So I can also edit this right here. I can also decide to not to mirror, so that it only affects one side, just like maybe a flame or something. Or I can do mirror angle and length, then both is going to be mirrored. So if I want my drop to be bigger, to be fatter, I can do it like this using Shift. Awesome. So now I can just make this one with a fill instead, and check my proportions. Perhaps make this smaller and centered. Let's go to the next one. There's another tool that you should learn, which is called the pencil tool, and this is really good if you want to draw something like a mock-up, or if you want to have your signature, for example. So the cool thing about this is that it makes it into a vector. and so it's infinitely scalable as a signature. But obviously I'm not going to use that in my design system. I can always do, let's say, a more organic arrow like this, for example. Escape, select here, go to stroke, advanced stroke, and select line arrow, for example. And obviously all of this can be customized later if you want, using the Bezier curves, like so. Let's make it centered. I can decide that one of the point should not have an arrow. I can also make it fatter. And maybe add a circle here. Awesome. So let's create a new icon. This time we're going to create the download icon. Okay, so we're going to create a bunch of circles. The first one, I'm going to press O. It's going to be 12 by 12. The second one is going to be 10 by 10. So make it connect a little bit. The third one is going to be 18 by 18. And then another one which is 12 by 12. Make sure that the last one is on the same level as the first one. And then we just need to create a square using R. And voila, this is our cloud icon. Select all of those and then do union. Just gonna center it. If we look at the composition, you can see that it's approximately like this. You don't have to have exactly what I have, but it should look pretty good and you should fill the entire space. So what I want to show you is to use the stroke effect. So I'm gonna remove the fill and create a stroke instead. And here I just need to fix it a little bit. I'm also going to make it 2 pixel width. And I'm going to flatten this. So Command E, and now it becomes a vector. If I press enter, I can see that I have vector points. I'm going to go back to the pen tool to customize this. And let's say I want to have an opening here. So I'm gonna create a point right here, maybe 4 pixel from this one, and then another one 4 pixel. Finally, I'm gonna use the move tool to select just this vector point and delete, and voila. Now we're gonna go back to the pen tool. I'm gonna press P, click here roughly from the middle and roughly here at about 10 pixels down, and then use shift to create an arrow from here. And see, for most design tools you have to close the loop, but here in Figma I can just click from here again and then create another part of the arrow like this. I'm going to change the stroke, so I'm going to go to advanced stroke and set to round to make it look nicer. Cool, so let's take a look. It's looking pretty good. Now I just need a check icon and I'm going to be done for the day. So here I'm going to press P, let's say a very simple, very small check mark, and then go until here. Using shift I can have this really nice 45 degrees angle, so like this. And now let's edit the stroke. Let's make it 2 and let's make it round. Voila. That's it. At this point I just want to turn all of these icons into components. First of all, because I have so many layers, I just want to group all the rectangles into a group. So rectangles, and now I have the icons. Now what you can do is, let's say you select the first icon, you can set the constraints first, so center and then center, and here I can do Command Option G, and that's gonna put it in the frame. And using that frame, I can basically do Option and then drag one of the points and make it into a frame of 50 by 50. So I'm gonna use this frame to set my component, and I should do the same for all the other icons. So let's select all of these icons, set them to center and then center, and for each of them I'm gonna create a frame, so Command Option G. Awesome. So now we seem to have some extra layers here. We can delete them. We're gonna name each of these frame so that they can be named as a component. So this one is gonna be icons close, and I'm gonna do the rest as well. Great, so now I have all of these icons as components. I can just publish the changes, go here, and I can see all the icons and styles, as well as the assets and components, and I'm going to publish it. So I have all the icons that I need to create some of the designs that I want. So for example, this page, and specifically the tooltip here with some of these icons. So let's go to our design file and try to do that. Let's zoom out a little bit. I'm going to move these to the bottom for now, and I'm going to duplicate, or at least I'm going to create a new frame using the MacBook Pro. Let's copy and paste the hero and the header. So I'm going to select this here, Command V. I'm going to remove some of these elements that I don't need, and I'm going to change the background as well. So this one, let's change it to another one, or I can use one of the styles actually. So I'm going to use the React for Designers one. Let's change the text, React for Designers, as well as this text, and move it a little bit up, let's say 30 or 20. Now let's expand the page, the frame, and I want to show you how to use the bend tool. So I'm going to create a rectangle that's going to cover here to the full width. Let's set it to roughly 350. Set the fill to white, and then press enter. I'm gonna go to the bend tool here and click on it, and then I'm going to move around this side, the first portion, and move it like this. As you can see, I'm creating a wave. And now with the move tool, I can just move this down a little bit, and I can play with the Bezier curve like so to create my wave effect. So let's create a tooltip. First of all, maybe my frame is a little bit too big for now. I'm going to create a circle That's about 60 by 60 right here. And I'm going to change the style to, let's say, this one or this one. Let's have a stroke as well, and the stroke is going to be 2, as well as it's going to have a gradient. So I can use again one of the color styles, so like this one, and I'm going to zoom in, shift 2, zoom out a little bit, go to the components, and this is where I can find the icons. So the one that I want is the close icon. So I'm going to put it right here, and I can fill it to white. For the actual circle, I'm going to add the drop shadow. So let's say a button drop shadow 1. Since it's a hover state, I'm going to set it to shadow 2. So what this means is that the user is going to click on the hamburger menu, and then it's going to have the close button. Let's create a rectangle of 420 by 500. Let's move it right here, around 20 from the left. Set it to a corner radius of 20. We're also going to create a 32 by 32 square, and this one is going to have a rotation of 45 degrees with a corner radius of 5. So what's going to happen is that we're going to point this to our menu here, and I'm going to select both of these shapes and do union like this. Now they're together. So let's change the color code to dark blue, like this one. We're going to apply a background blur, and when you do that, make sure that you're not touching the opacity of the layer, but the opacity of the fill. And we're going to set it to 80%, create a new effect, background blur. It's going to be at 40, like this. Let's add a drop shadow with a blur of 40 and a Y position of 20. And I want to show you a trick to make this rounded right here in this corner. We're going to set it on the union, we're going to set the corner radius to 10. So you can see it does this really nice corner radius right here. And we can obviously change it, but I'm going to settle for 10. Let's set an outline as well. So a stroke, set it to white, but make it 20% like this. So now we have a nice tooltip design. We just need to fill the content here. Let's start with the title. So I'm going to press T, React for Designers. I'm going to set it to white and use one of the style, which is 30. Set to left aligned with distance of 30 from the top and 40 from the left. Seems to be spaced out a little bit, so maybe I'll just set it to 0 like this. Now I'm going to create a cell for each section in my course. So let's create a frame of 420 by 44. Let's set it to transparent. And inside this frame, let's add a text for each section. So let's say intro to React, set it to white, and set a text of 16 like this. Let's create a line, so it's going to be to the bottom, and set it to 1. 40 from the left, and set it all the way to to the end. Like this. We should use the same opacity, so white 20%. We're also going to bring the icons. Let's go to components and let's bring the checkbox like this. We can make it smaller, let's say using the K, maybe to 40. Set the color to, let's say, light gray or blue. Center it. And then we also need the download icon. I'm going to bring it here. Again, I'm going to align it to the right. Move by roughly 20 pixels. Make it white at 80%. If it's too big, we can also use the scale to make it at 40 and center it, and then perhaps 30 from the right would be good. Alright, so this is our cell. We just need to create a component out of this and duplicate it multiple times. I'm gonna move this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is to create a component out of this. So I'm gonna copy this and go to my design system. Let's create a new one that's called cells. Press enter, and then for this one as well. I'm going to delete all the content, and I'm going to make the background to be using maybe black or dark gray or dark blue, like this one. And I'm going to paste my frame here, turn this into a component, call it cell, and now I can just publish the cell. Awesome. Now I'm going to go back to my design. I'm going to find the cell and use this one instead. So let's remove the frame, set it to perhaps 5 from here, and duplicate it multiple times. So for each of them, I can decide to hide, for example, the checkbox by just pressing delete. The same for the download icon, and the same for the line. All it's going to do is to hide it. It's not going to delete it for real, it's just going to hide it. I'm going to change the content. And there we go. So if another designer goes to the design system and wants to update it, for example, removes the drop shadow, makes this to be another color, like this one, the white to be not as light, and publish the change, then the change can be reflected right here, but the next person has to review the change in order to update it. So when I update it, it's just gonna update automatically, like this. So we have learned a ton today. We've learned how to create these icons from scratch. We've learned how to use vector networks, how to use the Bezier curves. We've also learned how to design the wave here using the bend tool. And we did a quick UI for the tooltip using a component that is a cell. So I hope you had a ton of fun learning all of this stuff. Feel free to share them on Twitter, on Facebook. I would love to see what you have created using all of these techniques. In the next lesson, we're going to learn how to share our designs with our teammates, how to inspect properties. So for someone who's a developer, for example, can look at the properties, the distances, and the size. They can also get SVG code as well as the assets provided inside the document. So I hope to see you in the next session. Thanks very much.